In this series, we are trying to give you a sense of how to navigate in the world of AI, basically, right? So even if you don't intend to become a full-time data scientist, you should be able to get a good sense of how to brace up for AI and automation era, even as a consumer of AI-enabled automation. Yeah. So let's get started. First with the topic, which is bracing up for automation of automation of automation. And we could really, when I was writing the topic, I wanted to add a little more a number of iterations. And what it really means is that in theory, this automation of automation really comes with our own evolutions as humans, right? This has sort of abstracted and help us abstract our thinking in terms of how to deal with the world and to be specific, nature itself, right? So let's get started with the topic. So to have us started, just a second. So to set the context here, automation, although it's a modern word, some coined somewhere in middle of 20th century, 1950s or so, but automation as a concept has been as old as the existence of mankind itself. Yeah. So in the picture on the right hand side, just let me get the pointer. Yeah. So on the right hand side, what you see is a depiction of how we have had various kinds of tools depending on whichever age, Stone Age, Bronze Age, or whichever age we are in, right, all the way up to the computer age that we are in currently. So we have had tools to deal and to interact with the nature, correct? Now even before we think of starting, we start thinking our interaction with nature. Nature on its own somewhat follows a predictable patterns. Its various systems seem like somewhat automated, right? If there is a disturbance in one subsystem, it always have the impact on the other subsystem, right? And those subsystems seem to be interacting with each other as if they've been programmed by and large, right? So to set us for the rest of the presentation, right? What I want to emphasize here, that we should be having an evolutionary perspective of what automation is, and not really limit ourselves into thinking that this is something related to AI and computers and the world of internet, right? And lastly, automation is not something bad, as you might be coming across various newspaper headlines, although we'll talk about it later in much more detail, right? So one, that we'll be trying to develop an evolutionary perspective of automation itself, and we'll not try to be judgmental about whether it is good or bad. Yeah. All right. So this is and we are sort of not really focusing on what happened with us when we were in the Stone Ages and Bronze Ages, right? Let's limit our focus to the modern era. And modern era, by modern era, I mean we are going back to say 16th century or so, not beyond that. Yeah. And from that, our journey in terms of industrial development is largely divided into 4 phases, right? The first ever industrial revolution, which is now called as Industry 1.0, right? And after that, there have been 3 more industrial revolutions, although these are not very standard terms, but yes, largely agreed upon. And if you search the internet by Industry 4.0 or something, you'll find a lot of material, and people agreeing to the same timelines. So the timelines really we are talking about for Industry 1.0 is somewhere between somewhere at 1750, basically mid 18th century to late 18th century, late 19th century. And then we have Industry 2, which is starting somewhere in 1900s, early 20th century to end of 20th century, and then Industry 3, which is really starting somewhere 1975, last quarter of 20th century, to the advent of the current millennium that we are in, right? And from say early 2000s is what is called the Industry 4.0. Yeah. So in terms of various now why do we divide these centuries in just these four segments is because of the key scientific innovations, of course, with respect to automation, and that's why we are talking about it in this class. So Industry 1.0 was really about people, James Watt, Graham Bell, Thomas Edison, right? Basically the pillars of that revolution were steam engine, electricity, and telephone, right? By the time it is 1900s, we are on to principles of scientific management, mass production, assembly lines making cars, and by the time it is 1975 or so, right, we have the companies like Microsoft's, IBM's of the world, right, which are starting with the advent of the computers era, so to speak, right, which is dominated by mobile telephony, internet, etc. Telephone, as designed by Graham Bell, we had it long back. And from mid 2000s or so, we are in a world which is dominated by AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, 3D printing, blockchains, and all these jargon that you must be reading in the newspapers every day, right? Now this is the evolution of automation itself, right? So just to give you a context, if you think of a company's average life in across these industrial revolutions, going back to Industry 1.0, this was we are talking about companies like East India Company, which had which survived for almost 250 years or so, right? And then in the consequent industrial revolutions, the average age of a typical company, organization has been reducing, and as of today, it is less than 5 years. And if you specifically talk about the COVID period, right, the time that it takes to start a company is really limited to a couple of months. Not that the valuations etc. will be very high, but you can have a sustainable running business within a matter of months. And all that has been enabled by the various layers of automation that we have had starting from Industry 1.0, right? So that's the a trend or a pattern in terms of the average age, and that has a lot of implications in terms of your own typical period of engagement with an employer, which is as of today is limited to just a couple of years. That's a lot, right? And in the Industry 4, what we also have another phenomenon called gig economy, right, where you are not really engaged with just one employer, but maybe with multiple employers doing multiple things at a time, right? So this is also an important trend to keep in mind as we study the evolution of automation itself. Now, another bit which is again very interesting is what we are doing across across these each industrial revolutions. So in the Industry 1.0, what we are essentially doing is that we are trying to conquer the raw forces of nature. We are trying to automate. We are trying to replace the man's physical power by the mechanical power. We are trying to automate the mobility. We are trying to go against the gravity, etc., right? This is what we are doing to the nature and to ourselves. largely we are trying to secure ourselves and safeguard ourselves from the adversities of nature, really. So the two components, what we are doing to the nature and what we are doing to ourselves. In the next revolution, which is the industry 2.0, we are trying to multiply our productivity, right? And this is the era, when General Electric and Fords of the world are coming into existence, right? And by having all those assembly line productions, etc., we are trying to first going towards the massification of production. At the same time, for ourselves, we are searching for a little more dignity in terms of working conditions, etc. So by this time, you have a segment of employees, the supervisors, etc., who are not really supposed to be present at the site of the manufacturing itself, who can sort of somewhat remotely supervise the people who are working on the assembly line. And this is the time when we are entering into the sort of collarification of jobs, right? White collars and blue collar jobs and all those kind of segmentations, because now we are at a stage where we can afford, where at least a segment of employees can afford not to really make their hands dirty by the coal or by the manufacturing processes. They are not supposed to really be handing dealing with a hammer, etc., right? So that is what we are accomplishing in the industry 2.0. By the time we have internet and mobile telephony, it's the time when we are trying to connect with our friends, relatives, and colleagues. So businesses are now sort of spreading across the globe. There is no worry about transportation or telecommunication. That is really enabling the various manufacturing supply chains or value chains there, as they are spoken about in the manufacturing jargon, right? So this is what we are doing to the nature. This is what we are doing to the forces of nature. To ourselves, it is a time when we are moving towards, as individuals, as the race itself, towards a little bit of more self-actualization, right? In terms of that, we don't have to live in those joint families, and really, individual members of a family could be staying and working from different parts of the globe, and yet find themselves connected to each other. So that sort of eliminates the needs which was earlier not met in any of the previous revolutions. Now, last, in the times that we currently live in, this is really humanizing every object, inanimate or animate, right? So this is characterized by a phenomenon where even inanimate objects are having a life of their own, right? You have smart homes, you have smart refrigerator, you have smart ACs, everything is smart. It's a bit of humanization of inanimate object. At the same time, although it's a bit controversial, but it's a bit time, at the same time, it's a bit of dehumanizing the humans themselves, right? But yeah, that is what is happening. That has already started happening. So again, like I said in the very beginning, let's not try to judge whether it is dehumanizing or dehumanizing is good or bad, right? What we are doing to ourselves in this era is that we are already having multiple identities, alternative identities, right? So at workplace, at different employers, even among friends and relatives, we are already having multiple identities, one on Twitter and all these social media platforms, and the types of work that we are engaged in. We did not have such plurality of identities in any of the previous industrial revolutions. Yeah. So I hope that gives a brief snapshot of the evolution that we have had so far. Now, so in the rest of the presentation, we'll be just focusing, again, we'll be limiting the scope. We'll not be talking about industry 1, 2, and 3. We'll be focusing only about industry 4, again, sort of limiting the scope. And we'll try to understand because of the characteristics of industry 4.0, right? What it is doing to us, again, in terms of data that we generate, and how automation of Industry 4.0, which is AI enabled automation, is coming as a solution to that phenomenon again. So having a lot of data may or may not be seen as a problem per se, but we are already in an era where we are generating insane amounts of data, right? So I'm sure all of you are aware of the enormity of data that we are generating every day, right? This is just to ensure that all of us are on the same page. Roughly 44 zettabytes data we are generating per day. Zettabytes, if you don't know, it's like 21 zeros. It has 44 followed by 21 zeros. That's the amount of data that we are generating, right? If we do not have automation, which is automation around data, then if we try to process and make sense of this amount of data by ourselves manually, right? Even if half of the global population becomes professional data scientists, even then we'll not be able to process this much data manually. So automation, because of this phenomenon, is rather a response to this phenomenon, right? Again, we'll talk about people are still judging whether it is good or bad, but for us, to me personally, this is just a response. This is neither good or not, neither good nor bad. Yeah. So let's see now how AI is impacting. Yeah, AI enabled automation is impacting the various sectors of the economy, as we know. Manufacturing, agriculture, the world of finance, education, everything, right? And then more importantly, there's another interesting field, which is AI automating itself, right? So we'll have a look at automation around data in two sort of segments. First is how AI is automating others, right? So on the left hand side, this is if you try to do a Google search, right? AI's impact on, and Google's autocomplete gives you almost every important relevant sector. Now we'll not go into too many details around this about how exactly individual areas is being impacted. I've just listed down a couple of examples. So this one is the world of driverless cars. on the right hand side, this is one example where Microsoft has implemented a worker safety system using an IoT analytics, right? Then we have application of machine learning in making the algorithmic trading even smarter. So algorithmic trading is already an advanced thing, but then applying the techniques of deep learning and all, they are being even more advanced and automated, right? Again, there is something called software 2.0, which is the term popularized by someone in Tesla, right? And which is nothing but how we have abstracted so much already in software development, that the software 1.0, as it is described now, whatever programming languages, C, C++, Java, and all that is involved in building and deploying a software, is really being abstracted by the way another layer of say neural networks or all these abstractions which are essential components of the machine learning world, right? And they operate at a very different level of abstraction. So really from the starting, let's think of automation in terms of a layered concept, right? Irrespective of the area that we are thinking about, it is really starting from the very in Industry 1.0. It is a layered concept. It's not something specific to this. So software 1.0, software 2.0 are really is about two different levels of abstraction. Again, this is very minimal, and we'll go deeper about these very sort of sectors and areas in the upcoming lectures that are planned in the series, right? For this, let me minimize the scope again by just focusing ourselves on AI automating itself, which is AI somehow trying to influence AI itself, right? And this is very interesting, and this is what yeah, my work currently focuses at Transorg a lot. So I'll try to categorize AI automating itself into three buckets, so to speak. One is the area of AI designing AI. By that I mean, if you're aware, if you're aware of, say, how a neural network is designed. So how you come up with the architecture of a neural network itself is a manual process, even as we speak, right? So if you are trying to build a, say, image recognition, a neural network for image recognition, how many layers is going to have, and what types of layers? There are multiple types of layers, right? How many of them, the kind of connections, all these things are still manual, right? And all those expert data scientists, they give a lot of trial and error to design the perfect network, a neural net, to solve a particular problem. So once that is designed, the rest of it sounds magic, image identification and all those things. That's what we see. But the very process of designing a neural net is very, very manual, labor intensive, and non-scalable, right? If you put two more people on the project, it doesn't scale that much proportionately, right? So AI, designing AI really is about solving that problem. So can AI itself come up with like smart suggestions to come up with a design of a neural network that we are trying to implement to solve another problem, right? So a popular term here is something called neural architecture search, for example, right? Which is the way about how to go about searching for the perfect architecture of a neural net itself. Yeah. So this is about the first bucket. Second bucket is really about, mm, you have decided on the structure of the neural net. You have the training data with you. Now, is there a way that, given the algorithm, given the data, can I still improve the accuracy of the model? So usually manually, if one were to do some work in this is related to something called feature engineering, and I'm deliberately not going into any of these technical terms because it's beyond the scope of this presentation. I've kept the theme of this presentation around automation, so I'm deliberately not touching upon, and that's why this somewhat empty slide, right? So building so basically increasing the accuracy of the models that you have for a given algorithm, for a given data set, is centered around uh, something called feature engineering, right? And feature engineering till date is a very, very manual and again labor intensive process. So this bucket, AI is trying to, at least partially, if not fully, come up with a solution that so that we can automate the process of feature engineering itself. Yes, so that's about the second bucket. Now, in the third bucket, what I call AI system improving another AI system, and this is very interesting, at the same time, very daunting also, right? So you have one AI system, it tries to outsmart the other AI system, the other AI system trying to fool it, and that's how both of them learn in conjunction, by outdoing the other, and over time they become smarter and smarter. So if you're interested, you can look up what is called generative adversarial networks, or GAN for short. So that's about AI system improving the AI system, right? So we have limited the scope. Now we are talking about AI automating itself, right? And out of these three buckets, most of my work at Transorg revolves around the first two buckets, right? And these two things combined, basically AI designing AI and building better models on the same data. They broadly, coarsely, although not technically very, very correct, but they make what is known as the automated machine learning. Now, automated machine learning again is something. If you do a quick Google search, you'll find a lot of material there, right? There are a lot of big players in this segment already. Now AutoML is essentially trying to solve these two problems, which is how to come up with a design and essentially finding the right algorithm, and then how to automate the process of feature engineering. Roughly these two buckets. Yeah. And to give you a sense, so now we have talked about how the enormity of data that we have that needs to be automated. Now we are at a stage where over data we are building models, and the number of models that a business deals with on a day-to-day basis is so huge that even the model building and model training, deployment, all those processes, they are also supposed to be automated, right? So we are at the second layer of automation in the very limited scope of AI and data, correct? So on the right hand side, what you see, in the form of a cloud, I'm just trying to depict, various end business functions related to data that a typical business might have, right? So on the left hand side, suppose you are searching Airbnb to you are looking for options for your vacation, right? So searching or user acquisition is the sort of almost the first step when you start interacting with the business, right? So through this search, you are of course dealing with a lot of data, right? There are some search, the Airbnb is giving you some options. You are say entering source and destination in your Uber app, right? That is again giving you some options of different kinds of cabs, right? And all that is being stored somewhere, in a central data warehouse, right? Where a lot of things are happening with data. And using this data, really, the business is trying to enable and empower other functions of the business. So in case of Uber, right, fraud detection is a very important area, right? So that you're not able to fool the system by providing fake rides and fake wrong credit cards and all, right? For the e-commerce players, recommendation systems, Netflix and Amazons of the world, right, and then Spotify, right, essentially eventually to the end customer, they are helping you sort your playlist, go give a good set of recommendations of movies and items to be purchased from Amazon and so on, right? And then dynamic pricing, if the business deals with it, again is another use case of machine learning model. Data monetization again is an area where a business like Facebook or any most of the businesses like who depend largely on generating money out of advertisements and all, they might also involve a lot of data monetization strategies that make use of a lot of machine learning models, right? And then last bit is about the customer services, right? So all of us, once we become the customer, we interact with the business, we give our comments, feedback, right, in Hindi, English, or a mixed, broken sentences, all those, right? And some machine learning system is still sort of trying to make sense of this, constantly listening to our comments and feedback, right? And trying to automate what is called automated dispute resolution, for example, right? Again, this is not comprehensive. This is a very indicative picture of how at various end business functions one could be using machine learning models. To give you a concrete example, Facebook, I think as of 2016 or 17, Facebook was training 3 lakh machine learning models per month. So that is the enormity of machine learning models themselves, right? But these big companies, what they have done, they have developed their own enterprise-wide machine learning engines, right? But that's not possible. That may be possible for bigger players who have bigger, deeper pockets. But for all other companies, is the landscape of various auto ML providers. So you have all the names, including our own product, which is an auto ML product called Clonizo Auto ML. And most of my work really revolves around this thing. Yeah. So this is as deep as I wanted to go with respect to the technicalities of the machine learning and automated machine learning. From now on, let's change the tracks a bit. Let's consolidate what we have learned so far. In terms of, we'll try to, distill a few takeaways in various forms as to just, how to make sense of what is already around us in the normality in terms of, Facebook shares or, various newspaper articles and so on, right? So this is what I've collected. This is a set of articles about what AI might do. People who are more on the manufacturing sides of the things, they talk and imagine AI in terms of robots, right? And automation, how automation might impact employment, joblessness, and all those things, right? If you look, and all these articles, by the way, are not older than, none of these articles is older than 2 years, I believe. Yeah. But at a cursory look at these articles will give you a sense that people are already taking extreme positions about whether automation, robots, AI, terms being used interchangeably. But this phenomenon, people are taking very extreme view whether it is good or bad. And so we must be aware of the two schools that exist about AI, right? So there is really, if one looks at AI's impact on human lives, there are people who are very excited and excited and aroused about the potential of AI and what good it can do, right? Basically, they think of a world which can be called AI utopia, right? And these are the people having arguments like we have already half the number of hours that we work as compared to how much we were working 150 years ago or so. And with the help of AI and automation, we are moving towards a workless future, and worklessness is really the ultimate goal of a revolution, right? If we do not have to work for a living, then we can focus more on creative things that we always wanted to do, but we do not get enough time for them, right? So in this, I would strongly encourage you to read this book, at least. If not the book, then you can listen to him. This person, this is a book by Harvard Business Review, published by HBR, and then you can really, if you don't have enough time, you can look at his YouTube videos. Very interesting set of arguments that he makes. But this is the positivists, right? But there's another schools of naysayers really about AI, right? Talking about AI dystopia of all kinds, right? In many forms. And here the argument really revolves around AI and automation bringing an unprecedented levels of unemployment, right? And that in turn might warrant the governments to take care of a lot of unemployment benefits and other livelihood assurance schemes, right? Really taking us back to the days of communist governments or so, right? They also talk about a lot of techno superstitions where you are literally not using your own agency, but rather depending on recommendation systems for every decision, almost every decision in your life, right? In the extreme sense, what they talk about is something called singularity, where AI's own consciousness will become superior than that of the mankind, right? And whatever we have conquered, whatever we have accomplished in terms of conquering the forces of the world, will actually be reversed, right? So one book here I would recommend by this is called Human Compatible. So this is something on the other extreme, correct? Now, of course, these are like two ends, black and white. There are people in between who, and this is specific to one person called Kevin Kelly, and who really does not want to tag AI as being utopian or dystopian. He encourages people to think of a so-called AI protopia. This is his own term that he has coined. And in the book, again, very interesting book where he gives 12 recommendations, 12 sort of forecasts into technology-enabled future. he talks about that, we should not be judging whether it is good or bad. We should be embracing and coming to terms with the reality of automation in bits and pieces as and when it is coming, right? So again, let's not go into too much details of these schools, but yes, so that is what even I would recommend you to think, have that lens of so-called AI pragmatism, right? Because let's leave the extremist, either positivist or naysayers, right? Let that be left to the novelist and fiction writers and futurists, right? For us, either as a direct consumer of automation, or a professional data scientist or machine learning engineer, right? We have to deal with the day-to-day realities of what is going on in the field of automation, right? So to help you appreciate that a bit more, let me give you that analogy of something called carbon footprint versus something called digital footprint. So carbon footprint, I'm sure you know already, is we have had excessive carbon footprint per capita, right? And that's what is causing the phenomenon of climate change, and that in turn is giving rise to many other problems of sea level rise, untimely rains, cropping patterns change, right? Acid rains and whatnot, right? Uh, that again, so the increased carbon footprint is really our own a consequence of our own interaction with nature, correct? Now, in the same manner of the industrial revolutions that we have had, right? Excessive digital footprint, and we talked about the numbers, 44 zettabytes, right? Excessive digital footprint is also a consequence of our own sort of evolution, right? And to me, as an AI pragmatist, right, automation, rather AI-enabled automation, is a response to our past actions that we've done to the nature, our current needs. We have to, deal and make sense of the data that we have created, and of course, our future ambitions. We are still not stopping. We are still trying to make the systems make use of the data that we generate a lot more, and make almost everything around us a lot more smarter, right? So thinking of automation merely in terms of unemployment and employment is really cynical, right? Because automation is impacting a lot more than just employment, right? It is so there is a huge area of uh, how ethical. So it's a lot of decision making that automation is doing for us, right? And there are a lot of concerns about the explainability, the accuracy, the ethics, the biasness of the machine learning models, and there are so many concerns. It is not just the employment, right? So this is a somewhat pragmatic view, somewhere between the two extremes that we talked about. Now, a few takeaways for your professional life, and as well as to some extent personal life, right? So for the professional future, I'll give you at least four things. And again, these are not prescriptions that you usually find otherwise in media or other forums. Is that this is a time to we are in a different world, we are in a different era, all those kind of things. But wherever we are, even within the industrial industry 4.0, first thing that we have to keep in mind as a data science professional, even as a potential or to be data science professional, right, is that we need to question the premises. And by that, what I mean is that I'll give you an example rather, right? So you must have seen, if you have ever done even an introductory level of data science, even if you have looked at an introduction of data science somewhere, is that AI will only routine, will replace and automate only the routine tasks, right? And everything, creative writing and painting, all that will not be something that AI will ever be able to do, right? But think of it. I mean, what is a routine task, right? Driving a couple of decades ago must have been like very creative and something that requires a lot of human judgment, right? But as we have evolved, we have even automated driving itself in terms of automated cars, correct? So this is just one example. Again, let's not go into too many details, but this is like one example of how you should not be fooled by, or you should not be limited by the literal meanings of the words, right? So what was fiction a couple of decades ago has become a hard reality of our present, right? What was creative a few decades ago is no longer creative. It is very routinized, right? Or at least this is what we have done to that phenomenon, correct? So this is one. You got to be questioning constantly the premises that you have, that you see around you. Second is don't live in denial. So again, in your free time, you can definitely uh, talk for or against something, right? But if automation is here, right, if it is inevitable, right, you have to come to terms with it as soon as possible. So again, I myself at a personal level am guilty of thinking that automation will not happen at the pace that it is happening, right? And back in I'll give you my example, wherein I think in 2011 or so, I was reading an article in Indian Express, and the author was talking about how the world has already moved in an so-called post-PC era, right? And my experience and my education had all been only on desktops, right? And till that date, I had thought that desktop was you know the most strong computation device, right? And this person was talking about tablets and smartphones, and they being much more stronger than the desktops, right? And yeah, 10 years later, it not just the tablets and smartphones, but almost every object has been sort of made smarter, correct? So not living in denial just because you don't want to accept does not mean it does not exist. Yeah. Next, develop an AI common sense. And what I mean by this, just to give you an analogy, right? People of our previous generation, right? They did not know when smartphones came. They did not know how to make sense of various smartphone characteristics, smartphone specifications, right? How much RAM it has, these many processor, octa core, and dual core is not a thing in the smartphones anymore. But how much RAM it has, how much ROM it has, right? We have over the last 4 or 5 years, right? Even our parents, they have developed this common sense about smartphone specifications. We have developed this common sense about broadband speeds, right? What it means to be a to work with a 1 Mbps versus a 100 Mbps internet speed, right? In the same way, in the AI world, we'll have to make sense of what AI can or cannot do, right? So we'll have to develop that common sense thinking in terms of whether this magic that we see around us, how it is done, and to what extent it is true. So its accuracy and its capability, both are something that we'll have to develop over time, right? And last, in terms of skills, right? You must have read a lot about, this is a different era, and we should be prepared for unlearning, relearning, learning, and all those phrases, right? But all that is correct. Of course, we'll have to do that. But then there's a deluge of new frameworks, skills, languages that are being brought to the market, and you, of course, practically cannot learn all of them. And even otherwise, only a few of them are going to be important for you. Yeah. So focus, with the help of your networks and professional and personal networks, try to get a sense of which skills are going to stay for long, right? So that's about the future. That's about the professional future. Quickly, like 2 minutes, let's go over what it means to you as a consumer of automation. So if you don't plan to, become a full-time data scientist, what it means and how to navigate that world, right? As a consumer of automation. So 4 or 5 things here. As a consumer of automation, you have to have a sense of how these things work, right? So for instance, you have automated homes, right? Automated cars. You should have a sense of how this works. Otherwise, even as a consumer, I mean, we talked about it a bit in the previous slide, but even as a consumer, just remember the embarrassment of our parents, right? Who did not know how to deal with usernames and passwords when social media, or when we first onboarded them on Facebook or something like that, right? So even to save ourselves of the embarrassments that we've already seen, right? We'll have to very quickly develop a consumer type of, at least a consumer type of understanding of how the automated systems work, correct? Otherwise, you cannot live in a house that is enabled fundamentally by Alexa, for instance, right? And real estate is already adopting these AI based systems, right? Next, this is going to the AI enabled automation is going to increase the number of choices that we have around us. Now, what I mean by that is that market in general, capitalism to be specific, has always been about creating more and more choices, right? So when you go purchase a refrigerator, smartphone, or washing machine, right, you have so many options, right? But this AI enabled automation is actually increasing the number of choices so much more that even to be able to select your favorite movie, or the movie that you want to watch from Netflix, the things that you want to purchase from Amazon, this just choice making itself cripples down and consumes a lot of cognitive power out of us, right? So as the number of choices increase, let's try to avoid the choices that we can afford not to make, because the decision making power that we have every day is still very limited. We have not evolved at the pace, our human brain has not evolved at the pace that the AI enabled automation has. Yeah. Next, multiplicity of identity. We already spoke about it. We by if we are dealing with multiple identities, alternative identities, then of course, if things go wrong, there are a lot of concerns about poor mental health, and you may not be finding very strong in terms of dealing with various aspects of your social life, right? This also we have talked about a bit, but in terms of social, like social interactions, right? This line, or the essential difference between animate and inanimate objects, right? Your uh, entire, every object in your house might be talking to you tomorrow, more than your own siblings, your own parents, right? So there's a lot of the balancing that is that will be done because of the automation, right? So I think that's it. That brings us to the end of this presentation, and I've taken already 50 minutes or so. Let me let's see if people are having some questions. I'll unmute you so that we can talk. I don't see any questions. All right, so I'm unmuting the audience. Give me a second. All right, so all of you are now unmuted, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have around what we just talked about, or anything else in terms of any other question related to data science, careers, future, that I can.
Can you hear me?
Yes, so this is Khushi, is it?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, sir, like given the pandemic situation right now we have, like how
Mhm.
bad is it going to, how bad or in a good way will it affect the AI this thing? And like how will this help in like terms of biomedical or biotech perspective? Can you like elaborate a bit on that?
Hey, you're not audible, Kushi. Somehow your voice has faded a bit towards the
Am
end
I
of the
audible
sentence.
now?
Yes, you are. Yes.
Huh. So, sir, my question to you is that given the COVID-19 pandemic situation, like what would be the pluses or minuses on AI, AI technology and everything, and how could this be like a benefit or bad thing for biotech or biomed branches in the coming future? Could you
Uh,
please
okay.
elaborate on that?
Sure. So if I understood your question, I think there are two parts to it, right? In terms of AI's application to AI itself, or other sectors like you're talking about biotechnology, right? Automation is going to become more and more prominent because of this pandemic. This is what my understanding is, because all the business models, all the characteristics, the way we behave, right? Just think of your own behavior. It is a lot more different in July as compared to what it was in April, right?
Definitely, sir.
So,
Yeah, definitely.
right, so that way, the frequency at which we would want to try and build and deploy various machine learning models is going to only increase. So that is in terms of AI adoption, this is only going to increase. In terms of biotechnology, I'm sorry, I'm not an expert, but then uh, given the healthcare crisis that we are in, right? A combination of healthcare tech plus AI might be a thing of future in the coming years or so. Definitely.
Okay, sir. Sir, like some aspects of biotech are there. For example, like for example, when experiments are carried out, or for example, the research is carried out. I don't think like the human touch that is needed will actually, can be replaced in the future. I mean, I'm just thinking from my
Sure.
side.
That's the same denial. I'm sorry to say that, but that's the same sort of thing that we have to guard ourselves against, right? I mentioned about AI will not
Yes,
be
I
able to
didn't.
do the
Yeah.
tasks which are human intensive, creative tasks, right? But you never know. That's the power of machine learning, right? It has been slowly automating a lot of things that we once thought could only be done by humans. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
sir. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Anyone else?
Hi,
Hi, is
Deepika
this
here.
Deepika?
Can you hear me?
Hi. Yes, yes, I can.
So, my doubt is, does the data science boil down only to artificial intelligence, machine learning, or anything of that sort? Is it only related to AI?
No, Deepika, no, it's not. So there are like these the theme of this presentation was more around automation, so we did not talk about it. But data science per se is not only related. But this is just the modeling part, the machine learning models that I briefly spoke about. But then if you are comfortable with data, there are a number of roles before the modeling stage itself. There's a lot of so-called descriptive analytics that can be done and is done a lot, right? So if you have data, not of the enormity that we talked about, but say in a business, right? If you have some data without even trying to do machine learning over it, you can still try to make sense of what are various trends, for example, right? So if you have heard of the terms, heard of these names of Tableau and all, ClickView and all these tools, right? They help you build very good dashboards, for example. So information dashboards is something that can still be done, and that does not require any amount of machine learning. Similarly, on the consumption side, if there is a data, you can still make sense of it. So you may not be doing the modeling yourself, right? Or maybe to avoid that modeling part, you could be using an auto ML system, for instance, right? So there are ways of circumventing, or there are ways of finding. I'm not sure if your question is more from the point of view of the kind of job roles that are available, but yes, there are job roles available as data analyst, and it's quite complex, even to deal with the descriptiveness of the data that a business has. There are a number of roles at different levels even before modeling. As a consumer, you can always definitely make sense of an output of an AI system.
Yes, okay, I got it. Thanks.
All right. Any more questions?
Hello.
Hi, is this
Uh,
Aditi?
yeah, hi, sir. So I want to know the scope and the future of RPA, robotics process automation, and what's the exact work that happens in it. So can you talk about that?
Sure. Future, I think, is like there is no limit to the extent that we can automate. I'll first tell you what robotic process automation is, right? So every business has a set of internal business processes, right, that it deals with on a day-to-day basis, and most of them, or rather many of them, have been manual in nature, right? So there's a when you are acquiring a customer, for instance, right, there's a lot of offline data that you might be collecting. You are opening a bank account in a in a bank, right? You might be filling up a paper form instead of an online form, right? You might be writing a, although you no longer do that, right? But that you might be writing a letter to somebody, to some business, right? This is your interaction with the business as a customer. But even internally, businesses deal with a lot of scanned documents, videos, and digital documents, but very big reports, for example, right? So a use case for RPA could be somebody, some senior executive trying to make quick sense of a 200-page report, right? Quick summary, right? That could be that if one could automate that, that would fall under one of the use cases of RPA, right? Scanning documents, making sense of the video data, making sense of the CCTV data, for example, right? If you want to build a system, right, so that somebody does not have to manually watch a CCTV footage, right? You can point out abnormalities in a data stream, for instance, right? All that becomes all that is grouped under the rubric of RPA. And there are a number of things. A lot of it can be done without machine learning, but much of it, and the future of RPA is going to be dominated by machine learning and data science. Does
All
it
right,
answer?
thank you, sir. Yeah, yeah, it does.
Okay. Somebody raising hand. I'm not sure if Mayank Verma wants to ask a question. Any more questions? Okay, I believe no more questions. Yeah, good. We finished on time, almost 12 o'clock. So I would thank you again, and I would encourage you to stay tuned for the next lecture that we have planned in this series. That's going to be more about the future of AI, various emerging fields. That's going to be more technical in nature. This one was about automation per se. So I would encourage you to attend all of those lectures. Okay. So thank you once again. Thank you for attending this. Goodbye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Yes, sir.